So kind of what I want to say, I want to walk you through the journey that we went through and that we're going through at Morgan Stanley for a couple of reasons. I know many of the people in the room, if not everyone, is technical practitioner. So some of the stuff I'm saying is more management speak than your typical like demo, which I'd love to be doing up here, and I could do demos, but probably get fired if I did them. At least this I can talk about, and we can go into some Q&A at the end. And it excites me how we did this, and hopefully you find it interesting and insightful for kind of what you're up to. So I'm going to briefly introduce myself. I'll go through like setting the background for what we did, and then like the journey we went through. And again, a success metric for me would be these materials are useful enough that you want to take them and modify them and reuse them, and I would open source them or whatever you want to call it, and then you can go take them and do what you need to with them. Because I think the space is, well, I'll get to in a minute, but it's very unexciting for most people. It's very demoralizing for tech developers to be thinking about tech debt all the time and being told they can't do it. This is the first conference I'm aware of where it's actually like devoted to this topic. And I don't go to that many conferences, but it's the first I'm aware of where it's a high energy focus on a kind of new generation of ways to tackle it. And I want to kind of dive in with that. Okay, before I get started, let me see if, I want to talk about some tech debt refactoring issue I had. So this is, I'll tell you, it's a personal story I think it'd be good to get started with. Kind of like now, right? We had like a minute before I started, we had some technical things to deal with. I went on Microsoft Build to talk about some technology thing we were working on, and this was during COVID, and we had to do a presentation. I had to use Microsoft Teams and we were all like Zooming from the house at that time. And last minute, they're like no virtual backgrounds, and that's like not something you throw on someone last minute. Now for me, it was worse because my house was under a major refactor. We got renovated the place, and we're living through it, and I needed to figure out what the hell to do. I didn't have lights in my ceiling. Okay. So this is the end, right? This is Microsoft's screenshot from their like Build conference 2021 or whatever year it was. On the right is like the virtual background I created. And behind that was this. This is like the most MacGyvered scene ever. There is a piece of a door frame that I took 2 spots out of my kitchen, connected it to electricity. I like cantilevered it over something. I had like, it was a mess, but this is what I did. So like this like defines for me kind of the experience of refactoring your code and trying to make it look like everything's kind of working okay. This for me is like my tech debt experience. So my name's Dov Katz. I've been at Morgan Stanley for 23 and change years. I have been in a bunch of roles from writing chat programs to kind of trading applications to central horizontal technology platforms and organizations, leading DevOps and things like that. So I've been doing a bunch of things, mostly hands-on and close to hands-on, if not. I still write code. Most of it has to do with Moderne these days, but I'm still writing code. I'm proud of that. So why do I think Code Remix is different? We spoke about, and I just want to dive into this because this, again, is exciting. And they asked me how much time I need. I said I was given an hour. Luckily, you all showed up, and nobody's reading the schedule on the back of this because it says 8:30 we start. So happy that you're all here. I tell people at work all the time, I could do this in 20 minutes. I could do this in 2 hours. As much time as you give me, I'll take, because there's plenty to talk about. And usually people are pretty interested in this topic because it's like a major pain point. So usually when I'm in a room with a bunch of people, they're like, you're talking about something, they're like nodding their heads like, yep, that's us, this is our problem, and so on and so forth. Whether that's going to happen in this room, I don't know. But at least I wanted to set some of the background. So setting the stage. Earlier this year, the Wall Street Journal put out an article that talking about technical debt, they put a big number next to it. I think this is about how much our national debt grows every half day or something like that, but it's a big number for us. It's certainly bigger than any of our tech budgets, I would have to assume. But it's growing. The problem's getting bigger, especially at large organizations. It's very easy to produce software. It's very hard to shut it off. I just saw a LinkedIn post from one of our peer institutions celebrating that they just shut some stuff off. And that's like kind of what it became because it's such a big struggle. So if things are growing and the software you have is atrophying all the time, there's more to sit and babysit and get fixed and deal with and remediate. That surface area problem is just growing and it's not shrinking. The people who pay the bills aren't always aware of the trade-offs when they ask for the red button that this client said, we'll do a really big deal with you if you get this red button in the application, if you have it there by Monday, and then they just say, we're going to postpone the big spring upgrade in the platform because I've got like 12 more of those features with 12 more clients. Those are the kinds of things, and I'm not saying that happens all the time, but it's not clear how to educate your sponsors on the importance of doing this relative to something that they do understand, which is these other activities that they've been told by a customer that they want to do. And obviously the whole security side. So this is obviously a challenge. I don't need to sell you on it. That's why you're all here, or that's why the people who paid for you to come sent you here. Why does it happen? We spoke about competing priorities, right? I have stuff to do, and other people have stuff that they want me to do. Evolution of needs. The system I built 15 years ago, I still have code that I wrote, like probably 20 years ago that's still in production. Fortunately, it's being phased out finally. But like it's older than my kids, and my kids are getting married. So does that mean like the code is getting married? Like it's a scary thought to think about that's code still in production. But things drift, right? You built an application and your requirements changed, the way you implemented it didn't, and so you end up with stuff that's just not fit for purpose anymore. Conway's law, you built an application exactly the way your org looks. And so if your orgs shift around, the application doesn't match that, not that that's a target. And then the complexity side, like you want to keep upgrading, you can't upgrade. You've either been too opinionated or not opinionated enough, depending what you're after. It's very complicated. How do organizations deal with this problem? And I'm talking specifically about large organizations. If you're from a small one, this might not be as relevant in your case, but there's flavors of this everywhere. You either have very opinionated platform teams that you have to build on top of that shared stack, and if you do that, they'll keep it up to date for you, and all you've got to do is bump your versions, right? You have a lot less autonomy, but extremely high alignment. You have people pushing for repo consolidation. I'll get into some of the numbers later, but tens of thousands of repos in these large organizations. You're pushing for monorepo, and then we have big debates about that now because the tools don't scale for 100 million lines of code. So what are you actually going to get when you're done? I like to talk about that and say there's like concentric circles. There's the monorepo problem is like three different things. There's a circle here that's about the default tool features. Like you're going to use the default tool features to help you manage the repo. There is human discipline. You're going to behave like a monorepo. Just everyone's going to voluntarily behave a certain way. And then there's the custom stuff you write to kind of do it all together. And everybody who implements this, in my opinion, is just taking those three levers and playing with a combination of the settings. But that's a challenge, right? Then you've got the motivated dev teams that are empowered with their X% of their backlog, and they're going to go fix stuff, right? And for them, that's great. You don't have to do anything. They're always keeping it up to date. You've got the central teams. I call it the F word. I can't stand it. It happens. It's where you in a large company will find budget to buy products because it's a terrible way to do things, which is called a factory. You get these pools of consultants, they come in, you need to upgrade from X to Y, they're gonna just sit around and do just that task for you, and they're gonna produce pull requests for all your dev teams, and then your dev teams don't have to spend time with it. That doesn't scale when you have thousands of new problems every year. You're not gonna get this large group of people. But that's great because if you have that going on, there's great budget to go claim to buy products like this, like buy products that are gonna do this better. And then there's also in these large organizations something that goes on where you need governance. Like management wants to know how much tech debt there is thrown about the organization. They want to know if the riskiest applications are they being dealt with priority. So there's a list of these things that get put in, tracked in by teams, which applications are affected by what. And then there's like a governance committee around like how much more of that work will the app owners take onto themselves and what's the priority. And we'll prioritize the top few things, and the others will be kind of lower priority, or we'll do it just for the riskiest applications. That's the stuff that goes on in large organizations. And the reason I'm telling you this is because when you come with different types of technology, these are the people you have to talk to, people you need to convince. Okay, so what's changed? A couple of things. Like number one, like as I said before, tech debt is outpacing our ability to deliver. We can no longer do anything for anyone because we're just busy dealing with tech debt. The factory thing I mentioned doesn't scale. I really like calling it the F word because back in the day, like that was like the way our parents, tools are getting better. So we're actually not doing anything different, but the tools are finding more stuff. And therefore we have more work to do just because the tools are getting better. The bespoke solutions that we have aren't working for this, meaning if someone built a script upgrader type thing, like those things don't scale either, but they are helpful. The pace of change, I have another slide talking about library owners making unilateral decisions to change stuff, and now you're stuck kind of upgrading because they've decided to change something. And it's overtaking the product work. This is a Stripes survey, developer coefficient. I think it was done in the last 6 months. I don't know exactly, but the colored non-gray part of that is like tech debt stuff. So I said it was overtaking. It's in this graph, it's about to overtake, but it's a real competitive threat to getting anything done on your product. There's also, at least in the financial services industry, an increasing level of attention on this stuff. After obviously the log4shell thing, everybody loves to talk about that. Every salesperson brings that up in the first part of their conversation just because they know people will nod in the room. I'm kind of sick of hearing it, to be honest, and I'm using it myself, so I feel like a hypocrite. But there's an increasing level of attention. The FFIEC is the Federal Financial Institution exam board, redid their rules. I think they redid their handbook for the first time in 15, 20 years, and there's a whole section on software end of life in there. And the need to govern that, and the need to identify and manage your software bill of materials. You see the ThoughtWorks graph showing SBOM, software bill of materials in there pretty high up. There's OpenSSF. This is just in the software supply chain security angle. People are paying more attention, which is good because the CISOs are paying more attention. And there's another group of people you can talk to about, I've got to do large upgrades to just get rid of dangerous stuff. Forget that it's old, forget that it's preventing me from moving to containers and cloud. It also is dangerous and I can't respond quickly enough. So, and then of course there's the other stuff, right? Rug pulls. I got this rug pull icon here going. It's when someone decides, oh yeah, the open source license for the next version of this thing is changing, and everyone's running for the doors, or someone's forking it in the community and all that, and you got to start making changes to your code because something else changed that you had nothing to do with. That's frustrating. Or they shrink the support windows in order to stay free and supported by the community. You have to be up to date, really up to date. I know most large organizations are not perfect in this regard. I'll just leave it there. The libraries are changing, as I mentioned. New libraries, every new developer comes with a new shiny tool they want to use. This library is so cool. You're adding those things. Some of them don't take off, and then you're stuck with abandoned libraries that are also a problem. And as I said before, the tools keep finding stuff. And then on top of that, there's this influx of new tools. We are the version bumping tools. Obviously, Jonathan spoke a little bit about that last night. There's that plus fixing the breaking changes tools. Obviously, Moderne is on that list, and there's some other tools in the space that do things a bit differently. SourceGraph has an approach with batch changes, and there's Combi. There's other tools that change your code for you. Then, of course, there's the Gen AI solutions. And every day, your management, the people you're talking to about fixing this tech debt problem, are being sold on another Gen AI idea, which is just the best thing they've ever heard of, and they have to go spend money on it. And that's not necessarily. And I'll get to, I have a slide, but part of what this journey was, at least for me, is you got to make sense of this stuff because you can't just go in looking at one problem. That's why I have the hammer nail thing. You can't just go in and look at one tool and say, hey, this is the only tool you're going to need, because there's 12 other people talking to leadership about their tool, about their thing. The sooner you recognize this is part of a larger picture where there's a combination of tools, the better, not just a more convincing argument, the more correct an argument you're going to be making. And whether over time those tools combine and integrate, great. But you have to recognize that there's a combination of ways to fight this, and you need to find the most effective way to use your budget to do that. So that's the backdrop. So I want to tell you what we are doing at Morgan Stanley, and I hope then I can kind of go through some insights, and maybe after that take some questions. There is no monitor of time up here, so I'm just going to go till someone kicks me off the stage. Fine with me. Okay. All right, this is an actual picture from an early run of the Dev Center in Moderne. That number is correct. 57,976 repos was the list I was working off of from the CMDB. That's a lot of repos, especially relative to that number of developers on the repos. This is not 100% accurate because we've tuned things, but let's assume we're in the tens of thousands of repos category. Okay, so I want to talk about the journey, things that we're doing that we started with, and I want to go back and give you the whole journey because at a large organization, getting things to happen requires a significant amount of governance and controls and reviews. It's not just oh, I want to turn this thing on, let's get it running in production next week. There may be companies where that can happen, and developers can download every tool that they want to do. That doesn't happen in large regulated institutions. Everything is prohibited. When the Fed calls up a company and says, what's running where, you need to be able to answer that question. The only way to do that is to shut the doors and let things come in through special controlled ways. So everything is very governed, but it's important to know how to manage expectations with that. But it's also kind of part of this journey. So what do we do? I mentioned to you, we took that influx of tools and kind of tried to make some sense of the space. I'm not saying that the graph and table that I used was perfect, but it started to, A, acknowledge all the other people running to give management their time to talk about something and just contextualize all the tools into one graph. explain to people why this is not that. Why can't I use GitHub Copilot to refactor 2,000 repositories? Why can't I use Moderne to rewrite Perl into Python? Like you just need to know like what the tools are and what you need. And in every large organization, there's going to be a need for a bunch of those tools to cover that array of problems. We wanted to make sure that this coalition was a developer-led. It was from the top down in terms of funding, but from the bottom up in terms of developer intake. The last thing I wanted to do was have another thing that pumps out pull requests to developers. I mean, I can tell you right now from personal, like on my phone right now, on like WhatsApp, there's probably 60 to 75 unread conversations on any given time. I just can't get through it. And on my email, there's over 200,000 unread emails. Pull requests is just the next one of those things. So if you're going to get a tool that's going to pump pull requests from someone that nobody knows, it's going to be looked at like marketing emails and spam. No one's going to like change them. You get to a place maybe with agentic AI where it can make the call and do it, but at least you need the person who owns the code to own the pull request and get the trust built, because that's the way for this to be effective. Otherwise, it's just a lot of activity with no outcome. And I'll talk about how we measure as well. We did a proof of concept with the on-premise Moderne DX, but in my back of my head, I'm like, I want that like visual. The visual is very compelling to people, to developers. I want that thing, so I'll show you what we did with that, but then I'll go use the open source thing, the free public tenant, and show people what it will look like when we have it. That's very useful for kind of sharing with people the tangible. Oh, look, there's a marketplace. You don't have to know what to do ahead of time. Like there's all these useful features there. So we did a paid evaluation to test the hypothesis. I gave the leadership big heads up. We're doing this evaluation. If the evaluation is successful, we're going to come back and ask for some funding. And I want to share like how I presented that. We hooked up our real org structure. I probably, I have some pictures of some of that, but like, when you get it all running somewhere and you can see your organization, so developers aren't just like taking like the Apache Foundation stuff and running refactors on it, but instead they're taking like their entire division's 1,200 repos and doing stuff on that. It makes a huge difference. I think at some point while we were setting this up, we stressed some of Moderne's product scale limitations. They have like if you've ever been on the Moderne website, you see like this like list of orgs, and I think there's like 25 different open source foundation orgs. We had 18,000 when I generated it from the CMDB. So I don't think the UI was really handling that very well. I don't think it's very interesting. And I'm about to put another 18,000 in, and we're like nervous to do it because like our whole CI plant has a separate set of repos. It's a long story. But then I created a business case, and we kept the devs engaged. The important thing here is that developers need to want this. If you're just going to do this as some convincing manager from some central team, like you need to tell them, we got you like the Ferrari, go drive it around. Like that's what we need to tell them. Not talking about cost, right? But like we got you this thing, go drive it around. This was for you to go do. This is not, we're going to do it and then we're going to do a bunch of work for you. That doesn't convince anyone to do anything. So this is the slide I find myself using a lot. It's a lot to read, and so hopefully you'll have it afterwards. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but problem space, tons of repos, not getting update. Remediation work is competing with our book of work for the business. All of that, right? The ability to do strategic upgrades. We want to move to modern cloud-based solutions. You can't because you're on this old version of JDKs, old version of Spring. Everything is intertangled. Like whatever that is, you have all the reasons to want to move faster, and you can't. There's a couple of tools that have been out in the space, right? The text editing tools, the version bumping tools, Gen AI, code assistance, and all of that. There's that camp. And then on the right-hand side, there's like the two new kind of generations of tools. One is the kind of generative AI where you're actually taking a code base and reverse constructing it into requirements and then re-implementing the requirements in something else. We wrote some homegrown stuff internally. I know a bunch of other people have written stuff. There's tools out there that do some of these things. And the other one is kind of large-scale refactoring, where you're doing like a deterministic refactor using a kind of a very specific way of manipulating code bases or compiled trees of code bases. And obviously, in this case, I'm talking about OpenRewrite and Moderne. And it's important because the people that are out there showing all the coolness, and it is coolness, by the way, to see someone who's rewritten a couple thousand lines of Perl from legacy like infrastructure tooling into Python is cool. They're using generative AI, doing really cool stuff. But that is cool. It's not solving the other kind of 20, 40,000 repo problem. So it's important to contextualize everything so you know that you'll need both, right? And the other thing I like to talk about with this slide is these two things on the right where most of the space on the slide is devoted. Generative AI, amazing. It is expensive compute and questionably deterministic, right? I'm not going to say non-deterministic, but it's questionably deterministic. I think some places they try to get better. as opposed to like an OpenRewrite solution, it's deterministic running on cheap compute. One scales, one doesn't. Both needed. And it's important to make that case because someone's like, how do I get thousands of repos done with Gen AI? You can't. You can use it to generate OpenRewrite stuff and then run that in scale. And there's a definite 1-2 punch you saw with Madi, but like there's definitely, my view is that combination is a great combination. But the actual running of code, when you have thousands of things that need to be fixed, you're not going to use generative AI to do that. So we had to make sense of the landscape. This is one view. This is another view. This view goes into like more of the SDLC. How do you write architecture decision records? By the way, I love doing that with like when I'm driving or doing something, I'll just dictate into my phone a whole bunch of ideas. I'll send it to a Gen AI like approved tool that we have and say, I really want to turn this into an ADR decision record. It's a great way to start. It's stupid because it sounds like all these Gen AI things like end the same way. They put this like weird conclusion at the end that like it's Gen AI now. But like it's a great way to restructure your thoughts. So useful. Documentation, generating tests, there's a lot of stuff. And the scaling versus non-scaling is just my way of saying like cheap compute versus expensive compute and that kind of thing. I think we have something here for test generating. I put that on the right side, but I know that they're using tree manipulation, especially diff blue in the room. It's also on the left side. Again, this is not a perfect chart, but it's necessary to arrange the information this way so people can understand where the thing they're advocating for falls in the tree. So here's what we did. Not going to go through this in great detail, but I'll call it an 18-month process till we're GA from when we started the exploration. If I give it, we could have gone faster. Maybe I wasn't timing it. My goal was to start in March, say we're going to do this. June, do a paid POC. Make a September business case, get it funded in December, and there's budget cycles, so you need to time this stuff well. And for me, that's like a template. So I do this with any case I'm making. There's other developer productivity things I have very similar views on, and I'm going to follow the same template because it works. You need to get security involved early if you're doing you're bringing in a SaaS solution. So for those of you that are working in an environment where you have kind of strong controls, I mean, my argument would be every person that uses something that's taking your intellectual property probably needs to have strong controls. But if you do have that, go to security early. I have to say that this was the fastest approval in terms of just the design. Like it was designed well, designed enterprise first. It was one of the fastest approvals to get us to be able to build, to go into dev. It was very fast, and I'll go through that maybe with some of the insights towards the end. But yeah, this is just the thing. We did workshops. I was doing videos, kind of recorded videos and sending it out to the dev community. You need to like influence the community, right? So I like the if it ain't broke, break it thing. I started writing blogs about this internally. Other people started getting excited about it because everyone wanted an exit from the misery, which is the tech debt remediation that they've been doing to date. So it's not hard to convince developers that the way that they're being forced to do things, someone with a clipboard is saying, this is what I need you to do. And they're like, how am I supposed to deliver anything? There are people who are interested enough in the power of these tools that they will make the time to do it, right? So it's kind of the way, there are two ways to look at it, right? If you want to make the pie, if you want to increase your size of the pie, you can make the pie bigger. That's definitely where this kind of fits in as well. People find that developers will be much more motivated, at least I had my experience, if there's a different set of solutions, and getting them motivated is part of the pathway for them to own the solution, because you owning it for them is not going to help. Like, even though, I have a fun story about that, I'll get to that after. But usually someone doesn't get a pull request accepted by someone that they don't know in an environment where there's no inner source or open source going on, right? If some random person you've never met before decided to do a pull request for you, yeah, if it's really easy, thank you for the favor, it's great. But otherwise, unless you're in a super inner source culture, and where you have applications owned by certain teams, they're not necessarily looking for contributions from unrelated teams the same way as like a shared tool or a shared library. As I said, we mapped the org. This is I tried to blur everything out, but this is the 18,000 tree org chart. Really sad when we did this. After it kept crashing, they took off the number. They had the count of repos next to it, and I took that off. I think it was too expensive to calculate. Love to get that back. But yeah. But then it became scrollable because I think it was just way too much to load in the UI. Every time I typed a letter on the type ahead, I would have to wait because it was too much memory. Now it's great. Now it works fine. But we mapped it in there. I built all the repos for the developers. This is one of those things. If anyone's deployed a system and started the process of getting it ready to run in an environment, let's say a large environment, you probably have this experience. I have this experience where like I have 2 alarms on my phone on Sunday to remember to go start the thing up on Sunday, so it's just magically working. Until it's handed over to production and it's ready to go, you're like, shit, Sunday morning, gotta go start the builds, gotta do it again Sunday afternoon. I have 1 more for like early Monday morning, just in case I forgot the other 2 or I wasn't at home. But like, there's gotta be other people in this room that I can't be the only one. But like, I do that, but it makes a difference because when you talk to people and all their stuff is ready to be used, they're not sitting trying to figure out how to build it. That makes a big difference. So you go to them with a solution, not a problem. It's not like, here, I've got this thing for you. You got to spend the next, I don't know, couple of hours learning it and then finagling with stuff. Like this was all ready for them to go. So I could show them what it looks like. This is very aligned with our tech strategy. Every large company will have some sort of technology strategy. It'll have something around modern and evergreen or whatever you want to call it. This fits right in. Go find the strategy people. They're out there pushing this from the CIO and from the leadership. You want to make sure this is part of their narrative. That becomes very important. You're doing this not for some personal gain. This is really to help everyone not suffer through the normal remediation. So we had once we got the strategy team involved, they've got like a comms team and they're making things all pretty. So thankfully my artwork is no longer needed. So I did make that thing on the right. That was like the internal microsite we had, but I'm so happy to have handed that over. Yeah, we have an internal question and answer thing like a Stack Overflow. We make sure SMEs are answering stuff there. For a while, like 2 or 3 people are like the market makers and they're trying to provide liquidity for answers. At some point, though, more people are answering those questions. So it takes a while, but you get there. Recognition, very important. So one of the things I did when I started this, I pulled a lot of data out. I'll show you like another visual in a second, but I pulled a lot of data out using their reporting tool and I put it into like Power BI to give dashboards and stuff. I really think that a tool like this has a lot of power to give recognition to kind of some unsung heroes in the organization. So if you're a developer and you want to contribute to like an inner source repo of recipes in the company to help do stuff, I want to give you credit every time that recipe is run. Like not royalties, but like I want you to be credited with the amount of time saved, the amount of capacity created from the recipe you ran. It's important. Developers like that validation and recognition. They're making a huge impact, way bigger than just their own project. They should be recognized for it. This is just the recognition of the people who are using the platform. We're in an early access program until I go GA, so I don't have to do that Sunday thing anymore. You're about to finish handing it over to our engineering team, but we have 1,000 people. We have over 1,000 people currently using it in early access. So this is the chart from that. So it's just people in the last month or whatever that did that. We have an inner source repo. We have a CI job that puts it, again, it was built for enterprise first, so it goes straight into like your artifact repository, Nexus Artifactory, whatever you have, or Maven, even to Maven if you're doing it kind of out in the open. We built that pipeline, so the idea is anyone can contribute. Once the successful build, it actually will republish directly into the marketplace from Moderne, and there people could see it. Right now there's 49 recipes in there. I have to say some of them I don't understand, but people are using them, so I can't complain. The ones that we wrote at the beginning, though, really help illustrate the point. In fact, I'm going to a meeting next week for a division. Let's say they've got, I don't know, probably over 10,000 repos, and their CIO wants to tell people, are you using this stuff enough? Are you paying attention to what's going on here? Are you using it? So I had to run a bunch of like recipes on all of their organization. So I started pulling out, Spring 3.4. Spring Boot 3.4 upgrade, 1,100 hours of recovery capacity. And also about the narrative on that. I'll get into measurement in the middle, but don't talk about time saved because time saved means cut staff. Talk about capacity recovered. You want to take the capacity you're wasting on this and move it back to do things for your business or your product or your customer. You're not doing this to have fewer people. And it's important how you make that narrative because, you can do that, but you don't be surprised if that's the direction that they start to go. This is about taking your tech talent and have them waste less time, and that's important. So making the business case, measurement's very important. And there's 2 things to consider measuring. These are some of the slides I used for the business case, like how are we doing it? There are activity metrics and outcome metrics. Don't go around patting yourself on the back. It's very easy to get lured into celebrating more activity. Yes, more activity will eventually lead to more outcomes, but what matters here is the capacity you actually created by merging in code changes that this did faster than a person would do it manually. We can't forget that because it's easier to calculate how many hours were saved and all of the recipes run together. It doesn't matter. What matters is the amount of time that developers don't have to do something that's been done already. And we came up with a couple of different ways to do that. There's no way to capture this completely, right? Developers don't have to use like Moderne. They can go use OpenRewrite, the command line interface. There's reporting opportunities there. We might just want to run certain recipes over the entire estate on a monthly basis and watch that burn down. And the less they find to do, we can capture the amount of hours as that burns down. Like the available hours to save goes down. So it must be some of that work's been done or someone deleted the code. But that's fine too. It's the less work to do. But yeah, very important. And we have a qualitative angle to this as well. You have a developer survey we're actually putting out next week to ask people like where they're struggling and get also sort of like an NPS score. A developer is happy with this or not? Are we helping them enough? Are we running enough workshops? Here's my like eye candy Power BI skills. I had to learn Power BI. Again, when you're doing this yourself, I know like it's not really a startup. Like you guys are a startup. Like in a large organization, it's like intrapreneurship. Like you have to do like this stuff and roll up your sleeves. So I'm writing code at the beginning of this to convince people this is worth like doing a POC of. And I'm also learning Power BI. This is as far as I got. And you know, which are the most popular recipes? Split up by organization, right? Now that I've got all the repos mapped to org, I could tell you which recipes are working for which org. Thankfully, some of our custom recipes are actually the ones being used the most. Sadly, they don't report any time saves because I think scanning recipes don't. There's PR for that. So I have to like give us credit some other way. But you can see here, divisions, leaderboards, all this stuff, it's very helpful. This is just early access. This is since I opened the thing in January, and you see that we're up to a healthy clip now of users before it goes GA. You still have to request access. So we've approved over like 1,016 developers. I want to put the map on here for a second as well, because this gave them a bit of a run for their money as well. There isn't really a good work window for redeploying the platform when you've got people everywhere. Like literally, I think almost every time zone except for Greenland. Like if you did stuff during the Greenland hours, I think that's like the largest span. But you see our teams in India. I spent a lot of time with them out there, and they have very, very big reception there. They're working a lot on that, and obviously North America, EMEA. But this is it's cool to have this to share with people, and then you filter this down by organization. You could see where the activity happens. So a couple of success stories. Again, no idea how I'm doing on time. Don't care. A couple of success stories. So here's one. They monorepo, a bunch of sub projects. Lots of pull requests. There's a lot of active developers. Not really a lot. We have a monorepo with 2,000 active developers and hundreds of pull requests open at any given time, and that's 20 some odd million lines of code and growing. But not that. But this is a kind of a like that's, and they're very, very. They don't like when we use the word monorepo, because how many monorepos can you actually have if it's a monorepo, right? Like is the right number 50,000? 50 monorepos? It's not a monorepo. It's a large consolidated repo, but mono implies Anyway, so these guys did a bunch of work and were able to make some of these upgrades way faster than they did before. And we kind of have a heuristic that measures technical fitness of the project based on its dependency age and based on legacy tech it's using. And this improved that as well. So you see some asterisk there. That's just what that means. Another one here where they were taking a project was taking like 64 hours to do something on one, and they were able to do 8 hours and do 3, just to show they were testing the waters on some of this tech. And so again, developers like to be able to share their results, and it's important that we celebrate this. It's also important that one of the things that we realize with this is that developers, like some of these recipes in the marketplace, will get you, 85% of the way there. They're not all going to get you 100% of the way there, and that's fine. Luckily you could take this and merge it. That's why you don't want to have unattended PR factories. You take what this is, merge it into a fork somewhere, and continue working on it. Like you have people that are overwhelmed with the idea of making this big change. If I can start on a Friday morning with 85% done, I'm willing to spend the other couple hours on a Friday getting us over the line. Bring back the changes we made to our team, help us like fortify that into some sort of recipe, and then publish that in the marketplace so the other bit is done. Like we had that a couple of times with some of our recipes. Like the Java upgrade recipes don't account for some build tools that we use, and therefore when you change a version there, we need to also change a version in one of these config files. So we made that recipe. Luckily, the composability, we wrap up the Java recipe, and that's the Morgan Stanley Java upgrade 21 recipe, and that's fine. Just it saves people. Then you can go straight to merge it in. Hopefully I have, and then right at the beginning, this was like total luck in terms, well, it was planning, sorry. When I was going to do the presentation for leadership, we just 2 or 3 days before, I was able to connect everything up in SAS. It was like a photo finish. And I was allowed to do it for dev purposes. I wasn't allowed to give it out to anybody. But when I did it, I immediately started running recipes like crazy on large swaths of the organization so I can calculate like how much time does this thing, how many hours of recovered capacity could I show people? And for some reason, right, if you go to your leadership and say, I'm gonna save you 30,000 hours, they'll look at you like you're bullshitting, you're crazy. But if you save 30,267 hours, they're gonna be like, oh God, I want this guy. He knows what he's talking about. So if you have like a made up algorithm that produces data, it's so much better than like coming up with a ballpark figure. But so we did, we mined the data out. We got a bunch of things, right? And that was very helpful in explaining exactly what this thing is going to do, right, when we get it going. And we have ambitious goals and we're gonna do it over a number of years, but this is definitely part of it, is like calculating the ROI to share with leadership and then tracking it. You have to be accountable for this stuff afterwards, which is why I need to make sure my recipe produces results. Okay, so where are we now? GA next month. So we have finished getting my engineering team together, the people that are gonna join us. Just another testament for how developer buzz worked. I actually just went on like our internal thing and just said I've got 2 open positions. If anyone, I'd much rather have internal mobility candidates than go out and hire someone from outside. I want people who know this environment. 11 people applied like within 24 hours, just sending an email. It wasn't like a formal thing, but like people wanted to be part of this, which is brilliant. And so I've got 2 people who are joining who are doing kind of the hands-on. I've already heard buzz about people saying we need to get them more capacity to write more recipes as a way to solve more stuff. So that's also kind of cool. We've got the workshops being developed internally and kind of using some of the material that Moderne's putting out. I know there was some cool training offering that Ruse was talking about. I want us to take advantage of that, get people like doing recipe writing workshops. I want the new languages, new language support that's coming, JavaScript, TypeScript, C#, Python. I want to figure out, like what I'm telling people is like, this is cool. We're going to use it mostly for Java now because that's where the ROI is now. But the reason it's this tool and not another tool is because those languages are coming. So with that, it's kind of like, I'm telling people now, the focus now is on Java while we toy around with the other ones, but eventually all these things go to business as usual. And so it's about, if this isn't the correct order, it'll be whatever the order is that they release stuff, but every one of and I own all the programming language teams doing kind of like the SME programming language and building the curated stacks. Every one of them is poking, kicking the tires, waiting there on standby to figure out when the stuff is available so they can write recipes to upgrade people on different versions of their stacks. So insights and takeaways. Really, does anyone know what time it is? Good? Okay. Okay, I have time for questions? Good. I've had to do this whole thing in like 20 minutes before. And other times I've done like in 2 hours. So a couple takeaways. Think small, get it working, but really have your eyes set on something big. And kick off the security review really early. We lucked out that this was designed in a way that was conducive to getting the approval. Really, there are a lot of vendors and products out there that kind of don't think about a lot of the problems that large organizations have around controls that they need to put in place or certain other standards that they have. I guess it helps with the background of this company having enterprise ties, but it was really designed well, and it showed in the way that the security approval process went for us for the initial build. Right, we have a 2-phase. You get initial permit to build stuff, and then you get the permit to deploy it in production. This went by very easy. Do demos on real code. There's so many products out there that are really cool, but you don't get the demo on your code base, and when you go talk to people, they can't really relate to the results. It made a huge difference to have access to a CLI and to stuff you can do internally, and do that and then show people what the UI looks like in the public internet so they get an idea of what you're going to have. It makes a big difference. As I said before, developers need to be the owners of the PRs. I'm a big believer of that. That means the actual app devs, it might mean the architect that's in a certain department who's kind of prioritizing what to do and has influence over them. It can't be some central team doling out hundreds of PRs to people, or they'll just get unanswered over time. Except when I do it, it's kind of fun. This is what I do a lot of road shows about this internally just to get it off the ground, get people excited, and I'll usually go around the room and I'll ask people, and I'll do a demo. And in India, it was a problem because this is when we discovered the work window, and the redeployment window was like right before I went on stage. But like now it's all better, obviously. But when I was going, I would ask someone for a department. I would do like a challenge with them and just like, who thinks they don't have this problem? One of my favorite recipes to do a demo on is the SLF for J logger needs to be named after its enclosing class. Like, you know how many times you could find in anybody's code Like you've got like a trade executor class that says it's a user cache because someone copied the damn like log creator from the top. It imports this weird class from somewhere else. They didn't notice it, and it's just like the user cache is failing to execute, and it's not supposed to be executing anything. You send the support team on a tail chase trying to figure this out. It's ridiculous. But you can find it like in every code base. There's always some, like, and it's not faulting the developers. It's so easy to do. Remember, this is before Gen AI or any of these things would be able to catch these mistakes or make those mistakes if it's Gen AI. But it's very easy to do. And I'm not doing it to like publicly shame the developers, but it's fun because people just like do that. So I run this recipe. I always find like 4 or 5 projects. I do the pull request up there with them using Moderne. It's all great. And then someone will ping me and be like, why did Dov open a pull request for this project, right? But that's why you got to own, this stuff's got to be owned by people. I could do it during a demo. And by the way, some of my demo PRs have been merged, which is cool but scary. But yeah, I mean, but that's like the lowest risk change. Like there has not been a time, like I had to think about it once. There was one time where it was like a foo test class that was testing the foo class. And like, for some reason they made the logger of the foo class. And I had to think philosophically, was there any reason why you'd ever want the logger to say it's foo and not foo test? Like whatever. But that was as close as I got to questioning whether someone did something the wrong way or not. Anyways, it's fun. It's fun. It makes for like good sport in these presentations. And you get to do a demo that you know is gonna work. So it's a good one. Yeah, get people excited. Get people really, again, you want them to think this is their tool. This is not like you trying to push something on them. If they're not excited, this won't go anywhere. And no matter how many activities you do, you won't get the outcome. And as I said, provide path for recognition and credit. 2 ways to get credit that I'm a big believer. One is inner source stats. Make sure that the execution numbers that come out of recipes contribute. I know in Moderne they have like you could see on the list of contributors. I think it's just from some index they do at build time. I want to put that in for us as well, so we can see who the people are that deserve the credit, and then how much time they contributed towards recovered capacity. And then on the last slide, perfect is the enemy of good. You have to provide early access. I don't care if it means every Sunday I'm kicking off some jobs. I want people using this thing. I can't imagine getting a check signed to put a product in production in December and have to wait until June for people to use it. Like, I wanted them using it January. And in January, they were using it. And those stats, you see a little bump there. February was already like hundreds of users. It's fine. You may be supporting it. You may be stressed on supporting it. But this is a dev tool. This is so much easier to roll out than like a trade execution or a business platform in terms of it can run in a less, it doesn't need to be at the same level of production as those things. It's not going to touch production systems. So even when it's running in your dev environment, you can still do all the same things that you could do when it's in production. So we were able to do some things with that while still maintaining the discipline and standards that we wanted in the company. I want people to know what I call it know your numbers, but I want people to know what opportunities they are, what they have. So that's important. And then the other thing I was going to mention here is the governance process. Remember I mentioned at the beginning, there is a tech debt governance process. There's a group of people who are reviewing the top priority tech debt remediation projects and deciding, this new big project, should we take this one on? Whether it's getting off of AngularJS when Google decided that it was end of life, or whether it's moving off of older versions of a certain vendor of a JDK or whatever it is that you're doing, right? Someone's got to decide that's a big enough priority that management's going to want to start tracking burn down of that thing. I started to, so I'm on that steering committee, and I make sure, and I'm watching it happen now in real time. But like, don't bring a problem, bring a solution. So if you don't have in that like project list a automation plan, I want the board of the group there just to immediately reject it. Don't come without knowing how you're going to automate that. Don't just come with more manual work. Nobody wants it. So change the culture around that. Make sure people know when they come, here's how we plan on automating it. Some things may not be automatable, but there are a bunch that are. So make sure that the people running those programs are only accepting new work if there's an automation strategy that's been vetted by some kind of skilled technologist or something like that. And that's why I was on the call last week, and you watch these new projects being proposed. And it's like, we're going to use Moderne for this. We're going to try out something for that. Like, people are starting to think differently. And that makes a huge difference. So that's the material I have. I'm open to questions if I still have time. It says I might. But I thank you so much for listening. Hopefully people found this useful. I think I have time for a few questions, if anyone has. Yep. I chose all of them. But yeah, no, how did I pick it? The nice part is you don't need to choose anything, right? You could do it all locally on disk, use the CLI, build a bunch of LSTs, pretend that they're living somewhere, run a bunch of recipes on them over and over again, and you don't need to like build a platform to do all that work. So there were like baby steps that we took at the beginning, but I wanted more very quickly because I knew what it would take to convince people that this is not just something that someone's going to do on their desktop. But yeah, just to start, I just found a bunch of repos and did it on my own. All the projects of the different teams I used to work with over the years, I just went to those repos because I knew them. I knew what skeletons might have been in the closet, at least when I left the team. So I knew what I could like chase down and do. It's a good question, but once you realize how it works, it's a very repeatable process, and it's built in a very asynchronous manner. So if you have Artifactory set up, you can asynchronously be pumping LSTs into Artifactory, independent of whether you're using the CLI or whether you're doing recipes in the SaaS or not. So it really helps to have this kind of componentized view where you can play around with part of it and not really have to wait till it's all ready to start going. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. I'll tell you my observations. Ultimately, I'm not the security team. We separate the controls aspects to them, but I'll tell you the things that I observed that made it easier. Number one, things came that needed to be run. They were downloadable on Maven Central, and they were not. You had to use a container. Like a lot of times, I want to get my hands on the jar because in certain environments we can't run containers as root. There's a whole bunch of things we can't do. I need to know what the thing's actually doing, so I could do that. So that was one. Two, the approach to connecting your on-prem instance to SaaS, just the way you do that, there's a lot of different ways to do that. Historically, it was a lot of like punch holes in the firewall and set up VPN connections or Route 66 or whatever you're going to do. That was a much easier process when you're doing kind of the reverse proxy, where you're basically dialing out to keep the connection open. So that means you have to get traffic approved by the firewall team, but you're not poking holes through your firewall to get it connected. That's a huge one. There's no reason a company should need firewall holes poked open anymore with all the reverse proxy type stuff out there. But that's a pattern, which just it adds months to the review, and you're waiting for some better solution. This was day one. We were able to do that as soon as we had approval to connect the proxy, whatever. There's that. There's working with the engineering team. They kind of knew what we needed when we were asking for stuff because they come from, I think, an enterprise software background, many of them. And so that really helped us a lot. They understood what we needed, why we needed it. Trying to think what else is in there that was the way in which the approach to encryption between your on-prem and SaaS was an acceptable argument from the security perspective around. It's rotating keys. If it can't keep a heartbeat open, it's evicting everything from the tenant so that you end up with, nothing is lingering out there for too long, and you end up with the efficiency of having things loaded there, but not like leaving stuff out there that's unencrypted. They worked on, whichever cloud tenants that you want. They had the right single sign-on, approach. They're just basic stuff. And they have like the concepts of, different privileged access, different admin functions and stuff like that. You take it for granted. At least I took it for granted because of so many companies I've dealt with that just everywhere you go, you're finding another problem. And when they find a problem, it's like, first I got to get it on their book of work to fix it, and that's a couple months. Then they got to get it re-reviewed afterwards, and that's a couple months. Like to get this thing done in 6 weeks was amazing, and it was just designed for that kind of review. I can go into more details offline, but I was very happy with that. Yeah. Yeah. So we have a bunch of things that we built internally, and I hope we open source some of that stuff because it's really cool. But we have like a entire dev telemetry platform that we built, and that has combinations of like recursive dependency scoring. There is no real concept of end of life in the open source community, which is a problem, right? If you saw those handbooks want you to think about that stuff differently, there's a bit of a problem because there isn't one. So if software company X has a piece of software and they say it's end of life, that's like the end of the world for you. But if two folks in their garage in the middle of like, I don't know, somewhere in some other faraway continent decide that they're going to stop working on something, we're totally cool with that. But these people, so it's a very complicated thing. So we have this dependency freshness score, which really just goes through, and it's kind of like the libyear type thing. It's getting the number of new versions of something that you're not on yet, and how old you have the other one, and it's going through and creating some tolerance level for that. There's a bunch of other metrics around your practicing of DevOps practices, where we have like a score for that, and those things get rolled up into like a technical fitness score. And so we use that a lot. But that's part of your question. Your other question is, how do we measure so we use those, and those will become part of the, when these projects change, those scores will improve, and we can look at the improvement in those scores, but it won't tell us, to our sponsor, how much capacity was created. So we kind of go back to like the number of hours a recipe says it would have taken someone to do manually it is a metric. I don't fully know if it's the most accurate metric. I think developer productivity metrics in general are bullshit. And so I think that if you have this metric generator or that metric generator, but relative to itself running over time, we can say that that's an improvement, and that's kind of what we're using now. I think it's the closest approximation to a number. It overcounts in some places. I'm sure it undercounts in other places, so it gives us something to work with. And we're finding it easy to have the conversation about, even if it's not entirely accurate. When do I plan to open source? I talked to my guys in Montreal. It's really, really cool stuff. So, yes? So a couple of things. So back to the freshness score and stuff like that. There is like in large organizations, there tends to be a required rigor around SDLC, stuff that just has to be followed. And over time, you move from you read the Accelerate book, like you move from change approval boards to like automated approvals and stuff like that. If your dependency freshness type scores fall below a certain threshold, all your ability to automate gets taken away from you. So that's one way to motivate people to stop, to care about it. But also they've got these high risk things. These governance groups are like tracking them down. The problem is no one has time to do it, and it's not necessarily a top priority for them. So if you start bringing them tools that will help them do it faster, find one or two motivated individuals in the team. They're willing to take a shot and try it out, and they're seeing results, and they're socializing it with the community internally, and other people are doing it too. It creates a buzz around it where people who have dreaded this work are now willing to give it a shot because they think they can really kind of eliminate a lot of it. And it's more cultural. It's not necessarily approvable, one way or the other, but it's definitely, you have to get the developers excited about it, or these tools just don't get used. So yeah.
It sounds like it's a full-time job, and I'm curious to know what your team structure looks like for that. Plus, what was your meeting cadence? How did you coordinate? What did that look like?
Yeah.
Was it daily, weekly? How many people were the core?
I can tell you. I'll tell you where we landed now, and then we can kind of figure it out. I have a global team of, let's say, between 60 and 80 people, whatever the number is, and they're working on their programming language stacks, and they've got a whole bunch of other work. I'm kind of like a core leadership group. For this project, it was me and a couple of people from the Java team who were aligned to it so they could help write recipes and do some of the like early days stuff. I brought someone in who, from that team, who was going to help write one of the Java services we needed, the org service, to help us get it off the ground. Now it's going to be 2 core dedicated heads that are working on, I call it product development, stuff like that. I've got 3 doing engineering, like LST, build jobs, that kind of stuff. And I've got like 1 SRE or 1.5 SRE. And that's kind of the core team. But then I've got, on top of that, like community leads that are all volunteer roles, like all over the company. They're part of the kind of normal tech strategy, change maker kind of people doing really great things. This became something that they latched onto. It highly aligns with like the technology strategy that we're rolling out. So after that core group, everything else is influence, not authority. And it's working because ultimately, the people we're getting contributions of recipes from different parts of the organization now. So how we manage that, if I think the 22 million line of code monorepo is a problem, just managing this recipe repo is becoming an interesting challenge of, so we have to think about the best way to create, like in a large organization with highly regulated controls, inner source in general, like you have to figure out how to do it when ownership is so dispersed. But yeah, that's a rough breakdown to where we are now. If we need more, we'll get more people. I know I mentioned earlier, someone wanted to send us more capacity to do more recipe writing. Some of that stuff could happen in their org too. So the question is whether that becomes, and then there's divisions who've dedicated like 3 people to work on Moderne stuff in a specific division. We own an affiliate company that we acquired. Their environment looks different. Someone's got to set up their agent to connect into SaaS and their build of LSDs. They have their own dedicated team working on that, and they have their own strategy for how they're going to roll it out in their organization. Same instance, same SaaS, but it comes in from their part of the org. Also very good back to that design question. Like that makes it easy to work with different affiliates that don't necessarily have access to the same artifactory and the same artifact repository. Yes. Well, luckily, this doesn't ever break production because we're not running it in production. Sure, you can definitely merge code in that is bad code, but that's the story of any code-changing tool that's out there, right? I venture to say that there's probably more AI code assistant production-related problems than there ever going to be on like a Moderne or OpenRewrite type of problem. But it doesn't mean it won't happen, right? If you tiptoed around a problem and suddenly best practices are applied to your code, which undoes your tiptoeing, you're going to have a problem with that, right? Biggest problem that I see now is people with bad test coverage, and that's why the diff blue, what you showed up on the screen is pretty cool, because I think building confidence, 2 ways to build confidence. One, the owner of the PR has got to be someone you trust and you know. The other is you got to trust that the code change is going to work, and test rigor is a great way to do that. Yeah.
We don't need it to be developed. But most organizations are actually increasing the team because there's more of a willingness to do custom development that might be your own IP. Because you know that you can get so much more done.
Yeah.
And there's a big appetite for it. Which way do you think you guys are leaning in your organization?
I can't talk too much about our workforce strategy, but it tends to, I know we've recently moved into like a multi-year view of what it needs to be. Whether the role of all of the developer productivity tooling is actually influencing the number of people, I think it's influencing the type of roles. So we could stay flat with the same number of people and get twice as much capacity if the roles that they take on are better benefiting from a human sitting in a chair. But I don't know that like if it's a number of people thing. It's much more to me is like what these people are doing than the number. If we want to do less and more of the important stuff, then you deal with the number of people. But if we want to do more important stuff at the beginning, it's get people to stop doing unimportant stuff. But yeah, I can't probably go into more details than that. Any other questions? Yes. It depends. There's 3,100 recipes in the marketplace, right? Things that I don't even know. I mean, maybe Madi will help find what I need to know. But a lot of times there's teams that know they've written a custom framework. They know they're going to need a custom recipe for it. It's just not out there. No one's ever heard of it before, and it's only in your company. You know you're going to need a custom recipe for that. The nice part is a lot of the custom recipes that started off were just like a combination of other like small atomic operations that were already recipes. So you just take a YAML file, you bash together like, oh, change this method, upgrade this version, run this other big upgrade recipe, and turn that into like one atomic action, and that becomes the recipe. You just like bless that, put that into source control, and it becomes in the marketplace. I'd say most of the recipes in the marketplace, I mean, we have 2 or 3 like mega recipes. It's like lots of code, but we got to 49 because a lot of them are just like YAMLs advertising combinations of the stuff that we wrote and different arguments. So, any other questions? I think I'm over now. Thank you very much, everyone.